My name is Emily Carter, and last Thanksgiving I walked into my family's farmhouse in Wharton, Texas, and saw my 82-year-old grandmother sitting on the floor while the rest of them laughed around the table. I didn't say a word. I pulled out the head chair, sat her down, and slammed my badge on the table. The silver caught the light from the chandelier, and the room went quiet. You could have heard a pin drop. That moment didn't come out of nowhere. It was years in the making, and if you'll let me take you back, you'll understand why the silence in that dining room meant more than any Thanksgiving prayer ever could. The drive home started before sunrise. I'd been working double shifts on patrol in Houston, where the sirens never seemed to rest, and for the first time in months, I had a day to myself. I didn't call ahead. I wanted to see things as they were, without warning. The highway stretched flat across the Texas prairie cotton fields, turned to stubble this time of year, and the morning air carried that dry chill that seeps into your sleeves. I cracked the window, let the smell of mesquite and damp earth remind me of where I came from. Wharton was still the same one main street, with the hardware store, the diner where I used to get biscuits with Grandma after Sunday church, and the worn-out feed mill that somehow still rattled on. Folks were hanging banners across storefronts for the holiday parade. It should have felt warm, but my chest stayed tight the closer I got to that old farmhouse. The Carter place sat at the end of a gravel road lined with pecan trees. I knew every crack in the driveway, every loose shutter that banged in the wind. The porch sagged a little more since I'd last seen it, and the white paint had given up the fight years ago. But it was still Grandma's house, at least. That's what I wanted to believe. I parked my truck and sat for a moment, engine ticking as it cooled. Through the front window, I could see shadows moving, hear the muffled sound of laughter and clinking silverware. The smell of turkey and cornbread dressing slipped through the cracks of the doorframe, so familiar it made my stomach ache. But something felt off. I stepped up onto the porch boots, crunching against the wood. The door wasn't locked, never had been. That house had always been open, no matter the weather or the hour. I pushed it gently, and the hinges let out their usual complaint. Inside, the warmth hit me first, the heat of the oven, the fire in the old brick fireplace, and the noise of a family gathered together. My eyes adjusted, and there it was. The big oak table in the center of the room, groaning under platters of food. My uncles Ray and Charlie, Aunt Cheryl, and a swarm of cousins filled every chair, glasses raised, voices overlapping. And then I saw her. Grandma Martha, 82 years old with silver hair pinned up neat shoulders, stooped but still proud. She was sitting on the floor back against the wall, a flimsy paper plate balanced on her knees. No chair, no cushion, just the floor. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The laughter around that table blurred into a dull roar like I was underwater. Grandma's eyes flicked up and met mine, wide and apologetic, as if she had to excuse herself for being there. My throat burned. I wanted to storm and shout demand and explanation. But instead, I froze, boots planted on the worn rug. I listened. Uncle Ray carved another slice of turkey grease shining on his fingers. "Pass me that gravy, Danny," he said to his son, ignoring the woman who had raised him under that very roof. Aunt Cheryl leaned back in her chair, sipping sweet tea. "Mom fusses too much about where she sits," she said with a dismissive laugh. "She's fine right there. Ain't no room at the table anyway." The others chuckled, clinked forks against plates. Grandma kept her eyes low, scooping mashed potatoes onto her paper plate with trembling hands. My fists clenched, nails biting into my palms. This wasn't just about a chair. It was about years, decades of her giving everything and being treated like nothing. I could feel the weight of my badge in my jacket pocket, heavy against my chest, reminding me who I was now. I thought about turning around, walking back out that door, pretending I hadn't seen. But then I remembered the woman who sat on the edge of my bed when I was 8 years old, holding my hand after my mother passed. I remembered her steady voice reading me psalms at night, the way she stitched my academy patches, with eyes dimming from age, but hands steady as ever. She never turned her back on me. I took a step forward. The floor creaked and heads turned. "Well, look who decided to show Uncle Ray," muttered, lips twisting. "The city cop graces us with her presence." Danny snickered, not looking up from his plate. Didn't know you were coming. Aunt Cheryl said, sugar in her voice, but her eyes narrow. We'd have made room. I didn't answer. My eyes stayed on Grandma, who tried to smile, tried to make light. She whispered, Emily, honey, you didn't have to come all this way. But I did. I had to. That was the beginning of the storm, though none of them saw it yet. The room stayed noisy, forks, scraping plates, glasses, clinking the chatter of my family piling on top of itself. But I didn't sit down. Not yet. I stayed standing near the doorway, letting the scene wash over me, forcing myself to take it in. Grandma shifted on the floor knees, stiff under her faded church dress, the one with little blue flowers she'd worn every Easter as long as I could remember. She tried to balance her plate, but the dressing kept sliding off the edge. I could see the tremor in her hand, the way she pressed her lips tight so no one would notice. The rest of them didn't care. Uncle Ray, his belly pressing against his shirt buttons, carved the turkey with that same smug grin I'd hated since I was a kid. Now this, he boasted, waving his knife. This is how you carve a bird. Not like the mess Dad used to make. Aunt Cheryl laughed, her bracelets jangling. Lord, he used to hack it to bits. Remember, Ma? She didn't even glance toward the floor when she said it. Grandma nodded faintly, a polite smile flickering before it slipped away. It was like watching a play I'd seen too many times before. Same jokes, same faces, same blindness. I'd left Wharton years ago to escape it, to build a life where respect wasn't something you had to beg for. But now, standing there, I realized Grandma had never escaped. She'd stayed in this house carrying them all on her back, and this was how they repaid her. I took another step forward, my boots loud against the worn boards. You just gonna stand there? Ray barked. Grab yourself a plate. Food's getting cold. I swallowed the words burning in my throat. Instead, I looked at Grandma. You doing okay down there? She gave me that gentle smile, the one that always broke me in two. I'm fine, sweetheart. Don't you worry about me. But I did. I always had. The truth was, this wasn't the first time I'd seen her pushed aside. Growing up, Grandma was the one who scraped by after Mom died, raising me in this old house, while the rest of them floated in and out like tumbleweeds. They took her money, her time, her patience, and they gave nothing back. I remember nights when she skipped dinner so I could eat mornings. She pressed a wrinkled $5 bill into my hand for lunch, even though I knew it was all she had. And yet every holiday, every gathering, she'd cook for them, clean for them, smile at their jokes. They never saw the cost. The sight of her on the floor now, like some stray dog hoping for scraps, hit harder than I expected. My jaw tightened until my teeth ached. You don't look fine, I said softly. Her eyes darted toward Ray, then back to me. It's just easier this way. They're comfortable at the table. Don't stir things up, Em. That phrase, don't stir things up, was her anthem. She'd said it when neighbors shorted her at the market, when uncles borrowed money and never paid it back, when Cheryl left her kids with her for days at a time without so much as a thank you. But sitting there, watching her knees dig into the rug, something in me snapped. I thought back to the academy, those long nights I spent studying statutes and case law, while Grandma sat up beside me with a lamp, reading her Bible, but keeping me company. She believed in me when no one else did. She told me, Emily, you're meant for more than this town. You're meant to stand tall. Now it was my turn to stand for her. Emily, Cheryl called, snapping me back. You want some sweet tea? Sit down already. I walked closer to the table. The laughter dimmed as they realized I wasn't smiling. My badge weighed heavy in my jacket pocket, a reminder of the authority I carried, not just legally, but morally. Grandma shifted again, her paper plate wobbling. A bit of gravy slid down her sleeve, and she dabbed at it with a napkin, embarrassed. That tiny act, the humiliation she tried to hide, lit the fuse. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. This wasn't just about a seat at a table. It was about decades of disrespect, about a woman who gave everything and got nothing back. Uncle Ray leaned back in his chair, squinting at me. What's with the long face, you on duty or something? His laugh set my teeth on edge. I looked around that table at every smirking face, every cousin too wrapped up in their own plate, to notice the woman who had built this family from the ground up. My voice came out calm, almost too calm. "Get up." The word hung in the air like smoke. Ray blinked. "What?" I stepped up to the head of the table, the chair beneath him, the one spot that had always symbolized power in that house. I said, "Get up." The chatter stopped. Even the kids froze forks halfway to their mouths. The only sound was the crackle of the fire. Ray let out a scoff, trying to laugh it off. "You serious?" "Dead serious." I held his gaze until the smirk slipped off his face. Slowly, with a grunt, he pushed back his chair. I slid it out farther and reached for Grandma. Her hands trembled as I helped her up, guiding her frail body to the head of the table. When she sat, her eyes filled with tears. Not of weakness, but of recognition. Someone, finally, saw her. And then I pulled my badge from my pocket, the metal catching the firelight. With one motion, I slammed it onto the table. The sound cracked through the silence, sharp and final. Every head turned, every voice died. That was the moment the room shifted. The room held its breath after the badge hit the wood. The gravy steam rose slow and thin, the fire cracked. And somewhere down the hall, the old grandfather clock ticked like it was counting to 10 for everyone in that room. Grandma sat small but straight in the head chair, her hands pressed flat on either side of the plate, like she needed to prove she belonged there. Nobody spoke. It felt like the house itself was listening. Silence has a way of pulling memory forward. In that hush, pieces of my life with Grandma stood up and walked back into the room, coal hot and bright. I saw us at the kitchen counter when I was 8, the week after my mother passed. There were casseroles everywhere, from churchwomen, tin-foil lids fogged from heat. Grandma stood at the sink with her sleeves rolled, washing the same coffee cup again and again because she needed to do something with her hands. I sat on the step stool and watched the yard turn violet in the evening. She finally dried the cup and came to me, set her big hand on the top of my head and said, "You will not be alone, Emily. Not a single day." She kept that promise like a vow. A log in the fireplace popped. In the quiet, Uncle Charlie cleared his throat like he had words lined up and then thought better of it. I stayed standing. I wasn't ready to talk. I wanted them to live in that stillness a minute longer, like sitting in church when the air goes holy and you can hear your own heart. I remembered Saturday mornings at the Wharton Diner, the two of us in a cracked vinyl booth near the window. She ordered coffee with plenty of cream and slid the little plastic creamer cups across the table so I could peel them open. She'd pick up the newspaper and read the headlines out loud, then look me in the eye and ask what I thought. I was 10, maybe 11, and she made me feel like my opinion mattered. After breakfast, we'd go by the H-E-B. She knew every cashier by name, and they all knew. Her grocery list by heart: flour, layered dried beans, cornbread mix, canned tomatoes, and a bag of peppermint discs for her purse. "They don't make women like her anymore," I'd heard Pastor Jim say once at a church supper, and I'd believed him. I could see her at the sewing machine the summer I got accepted to the academy, eyes squinting at the green light as she stitched my name tape onto a spare jacket so I could wear it during drills. The machine rattled loud enough to scare the cat, and she laughed when I jumped. "You stand tall, Em," she said, knotting the thread with knobby fingers. "You keep your chin level and don't let anyone talk you down." The porch fan turned slow overhead, moving the heat around. When she snipped the last thread, she smoothed the cloth like a blessing. Not everyone in this house talked blessings. When I was 13, Aunt Cheryl dropped her kids off for just an hour that turned into the whole weekend. Grandma made pancakes shaped like hearts, and the boys giggled so hard they spilled syrup everywhere. When Cheryl finally came back, she didn't say thanks. She snatched the boys by the wrists and told me, "Don't waste your time with that old woman. She's gonna be gone soon." I watched Grandma wipe the counter, smiling soft like the words didn't land. Later in her bedroom, I saw her sit on the edge of the bed and breathe slow, like she was keeping herself from breaking. They kept taking. Cousin Danny wrecked his truck behind the feed store. Grandma wrote a check for the ER visit and said nothing to anyone. Uncle Ray got laid off and the mortgage went past due. She sold her wedding band, Thin gold, worn almost white to a pawn shop in El Campo and covered 3 months, then told me it was found money. I saw the pink groove on her finger where the ring had been and pretended I didn't notice. Folks in Wharton would say, Martha Carter's got a heart like a barn door wide open. And that's true. But a door left open invites more than company. It invites crows. Pass the rolls. Danny whispered now, like the normal words could make the night ordinary again. He reached then, froze under my stare. I leaned on the back of Grandma's chair and took a breath of the room. Turkey fat coffee gone bitter on the hot plate, the lemon oil she rubbed into the table every Saturday since the 70s. This oak they'd all eaten off it their whole lives. First day of school breakfasts, payday pot roasts, Christmas ham. They'd broken bread on this surface until they forgot who baked it. When I was 17, Ray told me I'd never make it as a cop. It's not a girl's world, he said in the shed, poking at the mower with a screwdriver. You're soft. You cry at movies. I do cry at movies. I cried at the news once, watching a stranger hug his kid at graduation. But softness isn't a fault. It's a direction. Grandma stepped into the shed behind me that day, wiped grease off my cheek with her thumb, and said to Ray in that quiet steel voice, "A person can be gentle and still be the storm." He laughed. Then he borrowed $100 for gas. I wasn't there the first time they put her on the floor. I learned about it from the neighbor Mrs. Ruiz, who brought by tamales every December. It didn't look right, she told me months ago on my porch in Houston. They said she wanted to sit there. You know how your grandma is. She won't make a fuss. I remember holding the warm foil pan and telling myself it was an exaggeration, a misunderstanding. I wanted to believe my family was careless, not cruel. Tonight proved me wrong. Grandma lifted her fork now, slow the way old hands move when they're being watched. She glanced at me like she was scared I'd change my mind and pushed the chair back under Ray. I put my palm lightly on her shoulder. Eat, Grandma. My voice surprised me with how tender it sounded. She nodded and took a bite of turkey, chewing like a person trying to remember what dignity tastes like. Emily Aunt Cheryl said, testing the air, nobody meant anything by it. Mom knows we love her. Her bracelets jingled as she fiddled with her napkin. There's a lot of folks. And the table. The table has 8 chairs, I said. It's always had 8. Cheryl looked at the chandelier instead of me. You know how she is? She insists. Says the floor's easier on her back. Grandma flinched. I never said that, she whispered. Uncle Charlie let out a little laugh that died halfway. Let's not make a federal case. It's Thanksgiving. I stared at him until his mouth clicked shut. The room had the feeling of a courtroom before verdict papers still air thin. I let it sit. I wanted them to feel the years they'd stacked on this woman's shoulders. People think revenge is loud. Most days it's quiet. It's a mirror held still long enough that someone has to look. I thought of one more memory. It was a rainy night my senior year. The roof leaked above the hall, and Grandma set out a stock pot to catch the drops. We'll get a man out here next week, she said, more hope than plan. I had $50 from the diner and handed it over. She pushed it back. No, baby. That's your gas money. A roof can drip a while. A life shouldn't. She smiled then, and the water plinked the pot in a slow rhythm that sounded to me like promise. In the present, that same rhythm existed under the silence, the tick of the grandfather clock, the soft scrape of Grandma's fork, the small sounds of a house built by hands that believed love was action. I straightened up, felt the night settle into its shape. The badge on the table didn't just mean law, it meant line drawn. It meant not one more minute of this. I looked around the circle, seeing not strangers, but people shaped by habit. I felt anger, yes, but also a steadier thing, clarity. I could carry this whole room back through the years and show them every small theft they'd called easier this way. Or I could start here now with the simplest truth: the woman who fed us sits at the head. I slid Grandma's water closer. Drink, ma'am, I said like I might to anyone I respect. She smiled into her lap, a smile that looked like sunrise after a hard storm. And then finally I spoke. Ray, I said, my voice low, but sharp enough to slice through the hush. You remember the summer of '98. You lost your job at the refinery, bills stacked higher than the hay in your barn. Who kept the lights on? Who sold her wedding band at the pawn shop in El Campo just so you wouldn't lose this house? His eyes flicked down to the table knife still in his hand, but limp now, carving, forgotten. That was years ago, he muttered. Doesn't matter how long ago. She did it, and you thanked her by putting her on the floor. Grandma's fork paused halfway to her mouth. I felt her hand twitch under the table, searching for calm. I laid my palm on hers, steadying. I turned to Aunt Cheryl. Her bracelets jangled when she shifted like cheap wind chimes in a restless breeze. Cheryl, remember when you worked nights at the nursing home and left your boys here for weeks at a time? Who fed them, bathed them, sat up through their fevers while you were gone? Who gave them Christmas morning with presents she bought at the dollar store because you didn't bother? Don't you put that on me? She snapped. Her voice cracked sharp and brittle. I had to work. Yeah, I said calm as stone, and she had to raise your kids while you played the martyr. And now you hand her a paper plate and shove her against a wall like she's less than you. You call that love. The color rose up Cheryl's neck, her lipstick too bright against her pale skin. She looked at Grandma, but couldn't hold her gaze. Danny shifted in his chair, pushing mashed potatoes around his plate. This is stupid, he said, not looking up. Why make it a scene? Because it's already a scene I shot back. It's been a scene for years, you just got used to the script. He snorted. So what, you're the hero? Now riding in with your badge like you're better than us. I leaned forward, my voice steady. I'm not better. I just refuse to forget. The room was quiet, except for the tick of the clock and the whistle of the kettle someone had left on the stove. The smell of sweet potatoes mixed with the sour edge of tension, thick enough to choke on. I turned my eyes on each of them in turn, calling the roll of debts unpaid. Charlie, when you needed surgery for that hernia and couldn't afford time off, who drove you to Houston and sat in the waiting room for 12 hours straight, Grandma. And you never paid her back, not in money, not in kindness. Danny, I went on, when you flipped that truck behind the feed store, who walked into the ER with her checkbook, who signed her name to cover your bill because your daddy wouldn't lift a finger. He opened his mouth, then closed it, cheeks red. And Ray, I said again, letting the name drag like gravel, who kept this roof from caving in when the bank came sniffing, who let you sit at this head chair year after year like you'd earned it. He finally looked at me, eyes narrow pride bleeding into shame. She's my mother, he said weakly. Exactly. Your mother. And you put her on the floor. Grandma shifted, her voice trembling. Emily? Honey, it's all right. I didn't mind. But I turned to her, softening, only for her. It's not all right, Grandma. You gave them everything. You gave me everything. And they repay you with scraps. Her eyes watered, but she squeezed my hand. Don't waste your breath on anger, child. I looked back at the table. It's not anger, it's truth. The truth hung heavy, pressing on every bowed head. The clatter of forks had stopped. Nobody touched their food. I wanted them to sit in it, to taste the silence that comes when the excuses run dry. I leaned on the table close enough that they had no choice but to listen. You want to know why I wear this badge? I tapped the metal, its weight sharp against the oak. It's not just for the law, it's for the line. The line between right and wrong, respect and contempt. Tonight that line's right here, running straight through this table. Nobody moved, nobody dared. For years, they'd taken advantage of Grandma's quiet, of her kindness mistaken for weakness. They'd convinced themselves it was normal, that shoving her aside was just easier. But easy doesn't make it right. The fire crackled, the clock ticked, and in that silence, I knew they finally felt it. The mirror held steady, forcing them to see themselves as they were. Grandma's hand trembled in mine. She whispered, "Please let it be." But I shook my head, voice calm and final. "No, ma'am, not tonight." I let the badge sit there like a paperweight on the truth. Nobody moved. The chandelier hummed, the turkey steam fogged the air, and I slid my hand from Grandma's shoulder. "All right," I said, "we're done pretending this is normal." Ray opened his mouth. I lifted a finger and he closed it again. I didn't drive 5 hours to give a speech I went on. I came to put the record straight. I walked to the fridge, reached on top where Grandma kept the old blue biscuit tin dented, and set it by the cranberry sauce. I popped the lid. Inside Stubbs' notes, receipts curled from heat and years. Cheryl stiffened. "What are you doing with that?" "Reading," I said. I pulled the first stack check copies labeled in Grandma's steady hand. I read aloud. June 12th, 1998. Mortgage payment for Ray. $1,187.22. July, same. August, same. Notation, from pawned ring, don't tell him. Ray stared at the table runner. "She told me she didn't need that ring," he muttered. "She told you what would make you feel better?" I said. I set down another slip. ER bill for Daniel Carter, 2,340. Check number 4B156. Memo, truck accident do not mention. I tilted my head at Danny. "Grandma's signature kept collections from calling you through Christmas. You brought her lilies in January and called it even." Danny flushed. "I was 19. "Being 19 doesn't erase responsibility," I said. "Gratitude would have been a start." A thin pawn ticket lay brittle at the edges. El Campo Gold and Loan. Item wedding ring. Amount $400. I slid it in front of Ray and didn't say a word. Cheryl lifted her chin. "You think waving paper around makes you right?" We all pitched in. Mom wanted to help. I flipped to a grocery ledger. Pages ruled in blue. Lines ran back 20 years. Flour, sugar, school shoes. Cheryl boys' lunch money circled 3 times. "Pitching in is different from leaning," I said. "You didn't pitch. You leaned until she bowed." Cheryl's bracelets rang when she folded her arms. "That's unfair." "What's unfair is a woman who changed your boys by night and ironed your scrubs by day, sitting on the floor at a table she bought." Grandma's breath hissed pain, jumping her knee. I squeezed her shoulder. "You okay, ma'am?" She nodded once. "I'm all right." I pulled a bundle tied with red thread letters and church offering envelopes. "Martha, thank you for covering the electric bill." "Martha, your casserole saved the supper again." I placed them like a trail. Charlie, quiet until now, cleared his throat. "Why bring church into this?" "Because church knows what gratitude looks like," I said. "So do neighbors. Funny how everyone in town can see her except the people eating her food." I turned to Grandma. "Tell me something honest. Did you choose the floor?" Her eyes filled. She shook her head small. "They said it was easier." She whispered. "Less fuss." I let the words sting. Then I tapped the badge. Texas has a name for less fuss when it looks like this. It's called neglect. If I file a report with Adult Protective Services, they'll come and every one of you will learn what respect is supposed to look like. My voice stayed level. I would rather keep it in the family, but I won't blink. Ray bristled. "You threatening us in our own house." I leaned in. Her house. Paid for twice, once by your father and once by that ring. Cheryl's mouth opened closed. "So what do you want a parade?" "I want rules," I said. "Simple ones. Grandma sits at the head. She eats hot food on a real plate with a real fork. You ask her what she needs before you ask what she can do. You fix the handrail on the back steps by Tuesday. You stop calling selfish easier. And you apologize." Danny scoffed. "To who?" "To the woman you've turned into a chore." The kettle whistled on the stove. I clicked it off, poured hot water into the teapot with faded violets, set a cup in front of Grandma, tucked a napkin under the saucer like she used to for me when my hands shook over algebra. "Sugar." "One," she said, almost smiling. Cheryl tried to dodge. "You know I'm stretched thin. The boys?" "The boys are grown," I said. "You're not stretched. You're turned the wrong way." Charlie stared at his plate. "I didn't put her on the floor," he said, small. "You watched her there?" I answered. "Spectators keep the game going?" Ray pushed back a fraction chair leg, squeaking. "Fine," he snapped. "I'm sorry. You happy?" "No," I said. "Say it to her." He looked at Grandma like she was a stranger at a bank. "Ma," he said finally, "I'm sorry." The words scraped on the way out. Cheryl stared at the tablecloth. "Me too," she whispered. Danny swallowed. Yeah, sorry, Grandma. The apologies fell short, but they were a start. Grandma didn't gloat. She never did. She nodded once polite, like someone had finally returned a borrowed dish. We weren't going back to ordinary. I took a slim folder from my jacket forms. I keep for people who need them. Healthcare proxy, durable power of attorney, a one-page list of resources. I laid them by Grandma's plate. On Monday, I said, if you want, we'll go to the courthouse. We'll make it official that your voice comes first. Nobody sells this house without you saying so. Nobody decides where you live except you. Cheryl bristled again. She doesn't need that. We're family. Then it won't bother you. The front door rattled with a gust, and the grandfather clock hit the half hour. A change moved through the room like a draft after heat. Shame isn't pretty, but it can be cleansing. We're going to eat, I said. We're going to pass plates and look each other in the eye. And when someone knocks on that door, we'll let them in and they'll see Grandma where she belongs. Who's knocking? Ray asked. Neighbors bring pies, I said. You'd know that if you opened your door. I set the carving knife by Grandma's hand. You start, ma'am. She cut a slice with careful hands. We ate in a quiet that wasn't fear. It was reckoning plain and good. Then somebody knocked. The knock came sharp 3 raps against the old screen door. Everyone jumped a little, forks hovering mid-air. Ray muttered, "Who the hell?" But I was already moving. I opened the door and there stood Mrs. Ruiz, balancing a foil-covered pie with both hands, her grandson Marco shifting from foot to foot beside her. The November wind pushed cold across the porch, carrying the smell of cedar and chimney smoke from down the road. "Evening, Emily," she said, surprise flickering across her face. "Didn't know you were home. I brought pecans still warm." She lifted the pie. "Thought your grandma might like it." Behind me, the silence of the dining room pressed like a weight. I stepped aside. "Come on in." The screen creaked as she entered, Marco trailing. Their eyes landed on Grandma sitting at the head of the table, the badge glinting just inches from the serving platter. They took in the stiff shoulders of Ray, the pink blotch across Cheryl's cheeks, the way Danny stared holes into his potatoes. Mrs. Ruiz's lips pressed together. She looked at me, then at Grandma. "About time," she said softly. She set the pie down near the rolls and patted Grandma's shoulder. "You look good there, Martha." Grandma's eyes brimmed, but she smiled, whispering, "Thank you, Maria." Marco shifted awkwardly, eyes wide at the tension in the air. I ruffled his hair, trying to ease it, then turned back to the room. "See?" I said evenly. "Neighbors notice. Folks always notice." Cheryl sputtered, bracelets jangling. Nobody was hurting her. We just didn't. Didn't think respect mattered, I cut in. Didn't think anyone outside these walls would see. Ray shoved his chair back. "This is ridiculous. It's Thanksgiving. We're supposed to eat, not air dirty laundry." Mrs. Ruiz fixed him with a look I'd only ever seen her give rowdy kids at church. "Ray Carter, I've lived next door 40 years. I've watched your mother haul laundry in the rain, mow your yard when you were too hungover bake pies for your children's birthdays. And you let her sit on the floor." Her voice cracked like a whip. Ray's face flushed crimson. He muttered something I didn't catch and reached for his beer. I picked up the badge again and set it back down, harder this time. The sound carried like a gavel. Respect isn't optional. It's not charity. It's the law of decency. If you won't give it willingly, the world will remind you. Grandma's fork paused, trembling. "Emily, please." But I leaned toward her gently. "Eat, Grandma. Let them hear it from someone else for once." She obeyed, cutting into her turkey slice. The scrape of her knife sounded louder than anything else in the room. Mrs. Ruiz nodded firmly, then turned to the rest of the family. "I'll be telling the ladies at church she finally sat where she belongs. Maybe it'll spread quicker than your gossip ever did." Cheryl shrank, bracelets sliding down her wrist. Danny cleared his throat, mumbling, "Guess we got the point." "No," I said flat. "You don't get to guess. You get to face it. This isn't about saving face. It's about saving what's left of your mother's dignity." The quiet stretched again. Marco tugged his grandma's sleeve. "Can we go, Abuela?" "Not yet," she said, eyes still on Ray and Cheryl. Finally, Grandma set down her fork hands, folded, Children, she said softly, voice shaking but clear. I never asked for much. Just a little kindness. I never wanted to be a burden. But sitting on that floor. She trailed off, swallowed hard. I felt small. Smaller than I've ever felt in my life. No one moved. Even the fire seemed to still. I won't be small anymore, she said. The words hit like stone dropped in a still pond. Cheryl covered her face, shoulders shaking. Ray stared into his beer jaw, working, but no words coming. Mrs. Ruiz gave a satisfied nod. Good, she said, tucking her scarf tighter. She turned to me. You did right, mija. Thank you, I answered. She left the pie steaming on the table and guided Marco out. The door clicked shut behind them, and the silence inside wasn't hollow anymore. It was heavy, full of something closer to truth. I poured Grandma a glass of sweet tea, set it by her plate. Drink, ma'am, I said the way I'd say it to anyone I respected. She lifted it with both hands, sipped, and for the first time that night, her smile reached her eyes. The rest of us ate in silence, forks clinking shame-heavy in the air. No one dared to rise. The badge stayed where I'd set it, cold and certain. Outside, the wind rattled the pecan branches. Inside, the reckoning had settled in plain and final. When the eating finally stopped, nobody moved. The badge sat between the rolls and the cranberry. The house settled. Ray cleared his throat like a man about to pray and then thought better of it. I'll fix the handrail tomorrow, he said at last. Eyes on the cloth, and the back step. His voice had that look at the floor tone from his DUI hearing. Shouldn't have let it get this bad. Cheryl nodded without looking up. I'll take Mom to the doctor next week. Full checkup. Her bracelets didn't jingle. She'd folded them into her palm. No more putting it off. Danny stood. For a second, I thought he'd bolt. Instead, he went to the sink and started the dishes. Grandma, he said, you done with that plate, I'll get it. Grandma finished her cornbread and set her fork down like she was closing a chapter. Yes, Daniel, she said politely. Thank you. She placed her napkin in a neat fold and lifted her chin a notch. That small motion was louder than any speech. I slid the badge back into my pocket and felt the room exhale. All right, I said. Thanksgiving or not, we can do this decent. We cleared quietly. Charlie took the trash. Cheryl wiped the counters and set out Mrs. Ruiz's pecan pie. Ray fetched a screwdriver and tightened the door hinge that had squealed for years. When the kitchen shone and the leftovers were tucked away, I wrapped the old quilt around Grandma's shoulders. We stepped onto the porch. A cold moon hung above the pecan trees. The swing creaked as I eased her down. I sat beside her and felt the quilt pull our shoulders together the way it had when storms cracked the sky. I'm sorry about the floor, Grandma said finally. I didn't want to make trouble. You didn't, I told her. You told the truth by how you were treated. I just pointed. She looked at the trees. I raised them to be better. You did, I said. Now it's on them to prove it. She tugged the quilt closer. When your granddaddy built that table, he said the head chair was for whoever did the most work. Back then, it meant carving and serving. Seems to me the person doing the work changed and nobody thought to change the chair. I smiled into the cold. Consider it changed. Inside water ran. Someone started a load of laundry. On Monday, I said we'll go to the courthouse. Healthcare proxy. Power of attorney that says everything goes through you. Nobody signs, sells, or decides without you sitting at the head of it. She nodded. The front door opened. Ray stepped onto the porch, hat in his hands, like a boy at the principal's office. Ma, he said barely above a whisper. I told myself you preferred the floor so I wouldn't have to see. I'm going to make it right. Won't ask you to say thank you. I'll just do it. Grandma studied him the way a farmer studies a sky looking for weather, not words. Start with the handrail, she said. Then we'll see. He nodded and went back in. Cheryl came next. No bracelets now. She sat on the top step. I've been tired so long, I forgot what hard looks like, she said. Mom, I'm sorry. Grandma sighed. Bring me to the doctor. Come into the room. We listen together. Okay, Cheryl said and left it at that. We went back inside for pie. Mrs. Ruiz's pecan was still warm. I cut Grandma a neat slice and myself a sloppy one. The others kept a respectful distance at the edges of the kitchen, not in exile, just learning how to share space. Charlie brought in a toolbox. Tomorrow morning, he said, I'll be by with a man from church who knows roofs. That drip in the halls coming from a soft spot by the chimney? Grandma smiled. Good. I've got coffee for him. We ate with the quiet talk that belongs to people beginning again. A little before 10, folks started to leave. Cheryl kissed Grandma's cheek, awkward, honest, and whispered, Monday. I'll drive. Danny hugged her like a man, not a boy. Ray stacked the chairs around the table, leaving the head one where it belonged empty for the night, like a lit candle. After the door closed, I washed 2 last teacups and set them upside down on the towel. The house smelled like sugar and wood smoke. I helped Grandma to her room. The cat jumped up and claimed her feet before she even lay down. You staying tonight? She asked. If you want me, I said. I do. She found my hand. Thank you for the chair. Thank you for the table, I answered. She slept quick years of vigilance, finally relieved for a night. I sat in the hall and listened to the house breathe. A badge is good for stopping things. It can also start them repairs apologies, habits of care. The best laws exist before they're written. Quiet rules like make room, pass the plate, hot honor, the hands that fed you. In the morning, I brewed coffee and cracked the back door so the cold could find the steam. Ray showed up with a new 2x4 and a box of screws. He didn't knock. He went straight to the steps. That was the first proof. I don't know if my family will stay changed. People forget. Comfort is a powerful eraser. But now, there's a line in this house in my memory in Thanksgiving itself. It starts at a head chair and ends wherever dignity does. If you're listening, if you've got a table of your own, leave a seat for the one who held you up. Notice when the small person has been made smaller. Pull the chair out. Set them down. Eat while it's hot. And if the room goes quiet, let it. The quiet is where the truth begins. Thank you for staying with me. If this story stirred something in you, share it with someone who needs a chair pulled out for them. For more stories of quiet justice and everyday courage, you can subscribe or follow along. Either way, take care of your people tonight.